Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Eduyot. We are up to Perek Bet, Mishnah Bet. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'ilui Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Ranbai, Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Chana ben Miriam, Sason ben Raya, and Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen. And להבדיל בין חיים לחיים ודרפואה שלמה בדניאל שלום בן רוזה, בתור שעה חולי ישראל, החלמה מהרה, בנימין אור ציון חי בן דבורה. This Mishnah presents the second testimony of Rabbi Chanina, which is also recorded in Zvachim chapter 12, Mishnah 4. The hides of certain offerings were given to the Kohanim. The hides of the holiest offerings, the Kodesh Kodeshim, are given to the Kohanim. These offerings include the Olah, Chatat, Asham, and others. After the offerings were slaughtered and their blood sprinkled on the altar, they were skinned, their sacrificial portions were burned on the altar, and the hides were given to the Kohanim. In the event that one of these offerings became disqualified, the status of the hide depended on when the disqualification took place. If the offering became disqualified when the hide was still attached, the hide is left on the animal and is burned together with it. But if the offering became disqualified after the hide was removed, the disqualification does not affect the hide. Rather, the hide is given to the Kohanim as usual. The Mishnah considers the law where an offering became disqualified when the hide was still attached, but the disqualification was not discovered until after the hide was removed. For example, after the animal was skinned, its inner organs were inspected and it was found to be a trefa. Therefore, the animal was disqualified the whole time, even when the hide was still attached. Amar Rabbi Chanina Sgan HaKohanim, Rabbi Chanina, the administrator of the Kohanim, said, Mi'amai lo reiti or yotze lebet hasrefa. In all my days I never saw a hide taken out on its own to be burned in the place of burning. Rabbi Chanina testified that once the hide was removed from an offering, it was never taken to be burned. This shows that after the hide is removed, it is not burned under any circumstances, even if the offering is later discovered to have been disqualified from the start. If the disqualification was discovered before the hide was removed, the Kohanim would certainly not proceed to remove the hide, rather they would burn the entire animal as is. Therefore, the only possible situation where a hide might be burned on its own is where the disqualification was not known until after the hide's removal. Rabbi Chanina rules that since he never saw a hide taken to be burned on its own, the law must be that even in such a case, the hide is not burned but is given to the Kohanim. So it comes out that even though the offering is disqualified, the hide is permitted, because the hide of an offering becomes permitted for use when the offering's blood is sprinkled on the altar, which takes place before the animal is skinned. Since the offering was assumed to be valid at the time of the sprinkling, that is enough for the hide to remain permitted forever, even if the offering is later discovered to have been disqualified from before the sprinkling, as the Gemara explains in Masechet Zvachim, page 104a. Rabbi Akiva applies this principle to a similar situation. The hide of a blemished bechor is permitted for use by the Kohanim unless there was a disqualification in the animal shchita. The firstborn male offspring of a cow, sheep, or goat is automatically consecrated at birth as a bechor offering. It must be given to a Kohen and he brings it as an offering in the temple. If the bechor becomes blemished and cannot be brought as an offering, the Kohen may slaughter it anywhere and eat it. However, since a bechor is sanctified, even a blemished bechor remains subject to certain restrictions. One is permitted only to slaughter and eat it. One may not work it or shear its wool. Another restriction is that only if the blemished bechor is properly slaughtered and its meat thereby made fit for consumption, may the Kohen use its hide. If the animal dies without shchita so that its meat did not become permitted, the hide is also forbidden. Rabbi Akiva deals with the case where the shchita was assumed to be valid when it was performed, but was later found to be invalid. Amar Rabbi Akiva said, Midvarav lamadnu shamafshit et habechor v'nimtza trefa sheyeotu hakohanim beoro. From Rabbi Chanina's words, we learn that if one slaughters and skins a blemished bechor and it is then found to be a trefa, in which case the shchita was invalid, the Kohanim may still derive benefit from its hide. Since the shchita was assumed to be valid when it was performed, the hide remains permitted forever, even though the shchita was later discovered to have been invalid. Just as in Rabbi Chanina's case, the sprinkling of the blood makes the hide permissible forever, even if the offering is later discovered to have been disqualified, so does the shchita of a blemished bechor make the hide permissible forever, even if the shchita is later discovered to have been invalid. That's the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. The sages disagree with Rabbi Chanina's ruling. The But the sages say, Lo reinu eno raya, we have not seen is not a proof. Just because Rabbi Chanina never saw a hide being taken out on its own to be burned does not prove that it did not or could not happen. Maybe it just never happened in Rabbi Chanina's days that an offering was found to be disqualified after its hide was removed, or maybe this did happen and the hide was indeed taken out to be burned, but the Rabbi Chanina did not see it. Rather, the law is that the hide of a disqualified offering is taken out to the place of burning, even if the disqualification is not discovered until after the hide was removed. And the Rab tells us, וההלכה כרבי עקיבא בבכור בעל מום, כשתירו מומחה, the halacha follows the opinion of Rabbi Akiva regarding a firstborn animal with a blemish when it is made permitted by a specialist, by mumche, אבל לא התירו מומחה, לא, but if a specialist is not permitted, then no. וההלכה כחכמים בבכור תמים, and the halacha follows the sages by an unblemished firstborn, דבשר בקבורה ואור בשרפה. And that is then of Mishnah Bet. Mishnah Gimel presents the third and fourth testimonies of Rabbi Chanina, the administrator of the Kohanim. The third testimony concerns a legal document that was written by someone who stands to benefit from it. Af hu he'id an kfar katon shaya b'tzad Yerushalayim. He also testified about a small village close to Jerusalem, vaya bo zaken echad vaya malveh lechol bnei hakfar, in which there was a certain sage who would lend money to all the people of the village, v'chotev b'chtav yado, and he would write the loan documents in his own hand and give them to the borrowers, v'achrim chotmim, and others would sign the documents, meaning the borrowers arranged for qualified witnesses to sign the documents. The borrowers would then return the documents to the sage, who would hold on to them as proofs of the loan. This was not the common practice. A loan document was typically written by the borrower, not the lender. Ubama said of Nechachamim, an incident involving one such document came before the rabbis, Vetiru, and they permitted the practice of a lender writing the loan document. Such a document is valid even though it was written by the person who needs to use it. We trust that the document is accurate because it was signed by qualified witnesses, as the Mishnah explains below. The Mishnah elaborates upon this ruling. From this testimony you can learn, by the way, that a woman may write her own get. After she writes the get, she must transfer its ownership to the husband, because the get is ineffective unless it is owned by the husband. The husband has it signed by witnesses, and then he gives it back to her, thereby divorcing her. Ordinarily, the husband or his agent writes the get. The Mishnah teaches that this is not necessary, and this part of the Mishnah, which concerns a woman writing a get and a man writing a receipt, is also found in Gittin chapter 2, Mishnah 5. And our Mishnah continues, Vaish kotevet shovro, and a man may write his own receipt regarding the ketubah payment that he owed her. The receipt states that she has forgiven the ketubah payment, or that he has already paid her. The ketubah is the payment that a husband must give his wife if he divorces her, or that his heirs must give her if he dies before her. The usual practice is that the woman writes the receipt, has it signed by witnesses, and gives it to her husband so that he can use it as proof that he does not owe her anything. The Mishnah teaches that the receipt is valid even if the husband wrote it himself, despite his bias. Once he has written the document, he gives it to her, and after having it signed by witnesses, she returns it to him. Shen kiyum get ela bechutmav, because the power of a document, here the word get refers to any legal document, not only a bill of divorce, because the power of a document is established only by its signers, meaning by its witnesses. As long as the document is signed by qualified witnesses, it makes no difference who wrote it. Rabbi Chanina's fourth and final testimony involves a case of possible tumah. Val Machat, he also testified regarding a needle that had become tameh from a corpse, Shinimtzed babasar, that was found in the flesh of an offering when it was being cut up in the temple courtyard, and it was not known if the Kohen who cut up the flesh or his knife touched the needle, and thereby became tameh. Shasakin vayadayim torot vabasar tameh. According to Rabbi Chanina, the knife and the hands of the Kohen are tahor and the flesh is tameh. The Kohen and the knife are tahor because the temple courtyard is a public area, and the rule is that when a doubt regarding tumah arises in a public area, the items in question are assumed to have remained tahor. Whenever we cannot tell whether a tahor person or object became tameh, the rule is as follows. If the doubt arose in a public area, the item in question is assumed to have remained ta'or, but if the doubt arose in a private area, the Torah teaches that the item must be treated as tameh. This is learned from the Gemara in Sotah, page 28a and b. Since the temple courtyard was used by the public, it is considered a public area with respect to this law. The flesh of the animal, however, is tameh because it certainly touched the tameh needle. Despite the tameh flesh being tameh, it could not have transmitted tumah to the Kohen or his knife, because only an ava tumah can make a person or utensil tameh, and the flesh was not an ava tumah. It is a rule that food such as this flesh can never become an ava tumah. Even if food directly touches a corpse, it rises only to the level of a rishon, a first degree. Although the rabbis decreed that if a person touches tameh food, his hands become tameh, that law is not relevant here. Like many other rabbinic decrees, it did not apply in the temple. In order to teach this point, the Mishnah specifies that the Kohen's hands do not become tameh. But if the needle was found in the excrement inside the animal, everything including the flesh is ta'or, because excrement cannot become tameh. Only people, utensils, food, and drinkable liquids can become tameh, and it certainly cannot transmit tumah to anything else, since itself it cannot become tameh. And that is an Abotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.